Welcome back to our TVP World studio. Just as I promised a second ago, we are back with a very interesting interview on Georgian election. You're watching World Talks, and I'm Claudia Czerwińska. The pro-European opposition believes that Saturday's parliamentary elections were stolen by the ruling pro-Russian party, leading to the European Union demanding an investigation into reports of electoral violations. On Monday night, Georgians protested the results of the election, which they claim was rigged. To discuss what will happen to Georgia next, I'm joined by Shalva Dzebisashvili, professor of political science at the University of Georgia, Tbilisi. A very good morning. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, as we're looking at this election and what happened over the past few days since the Saturday vote, is the Western Dream beyond recovery for Georgia? Is there a chance that the EU accession could be possibly lost?
Definitely, there were some very strong warnings from the European Commission and the general European Union institutions that if the Georgian Dream doesn't change the policy, the rhetoric, and the general course of action, there will be absolutely no chance of joining the European Union and agreeing to the further implementation of the candidacy status. With all the actions done before and with the obvious facts of falsification of the election, rigged elections, there will be definitely no chance for Georgian Dream first to get the external legitimization, secondly internal legitimization, and with the absence of both level of legitimizations, Georgian Dream will never have any chance of pursuing its European, its European path.
As we're looking at the Georgian Dream, the previous ruling party and the party that with 54% of the Saturday's vote apparently won the election in Georgia, I wanted to ask you, for those of our viewers who might not know very much about Georgian politics, to pinpoint which of the actions by the Georgian Dream's party are actually considered pro-Russian. Because here on TVP World we talk a lot and we use this descriptor of this party being pro-Russian. What does it mean?
This is an interesting question because, being pro-Russian doesn't automatically means that, you have to implement all of the Russian demands. Being pro-Russian means the nature of the political regime. So the Georgian Dream, in fact, implements all the steps which Russia has done in the beginning of millennium. So slowly but surely turning the democratic structure of the political system in Georgia into initially kind of semi-authoritarian regime, ultimately ending up into a totalitarian system. But what we have seen during the last couple of months, this was, first of all, the introduction of the so-called Russian law, or what they call this law on foreign agents, which serves no other objective but basically to pressure, monitor, and control the civil society and civil society activism. Secondly, there were lots of other steps, like introducing several laws that basically pretty much, bring in question the well-functioning of the financial system of Georgia. Then there's these policies that undermine the coherence of European sanction policy towards Russia. Obviously, Georgia cannot join all of the sanctions imposed over Russia, but there are certain actions Georgia can certainly do, but Georgia doesn't do it. Georgia actually turns away from the European market and significantly kind of, makes the integration into the Russian economic system. We have a significant increase of trade with Russia and the decline of trade with the European Union. And obviously, this is the internal political system, the introduction of drastic draconic, measures to control the civil society, to control the activism, etc. All these makes the internal political system and the nature of the regime pro-Russian.
If the vote would not have taken place again, so considering that the voting that took place last weekend would be the legal vote and the Georgian Dream would actually be in power again, are we to expect any sanctions from the European Union? And most importantly, can Europe actually afford to push Georgia even further away by imposing those?
First of all, I have to highlight that there is there's actually no chance Georgian Dream would have won this election. So all the single polls, conducted before, months before, specifically after the introduction of Russian law, all the protests, etc., indicated that the Georgian Dream had significantly declined, popularity in the Georgia. It had between 30 to 35% of the polls. Then, with all these, falsification methods introduced, like massive intimidation of certain groups in urban areas, manipulation with personal IDs, technical manipulation, identification of voters, mobilization of criminal gangs, massive control of their own supporters turnout, and simply buying votes. All these are evidences that it's still coming in masses that prove that the Georgian Dream simply had practical and factual in real life, not a single chance to win these elections. But again, there is also a significant element, a geopolitical element in this struggle, because Georgia is not a kind of a standalone, as you already mentioned in your introduction, not a standalone case in this kind of struggle, democracy against autocracy. This is an integral element of the global struggle. So we see Russia cooperating with North Korea, Iran, etc. In Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine. These are elements of one global chain. So from that perspective, the fight of Georgian general society and population to preserve and save democracy it should not be regarded as a standalone case. We really have to think how the Western partners and friends of Georgia can support Georgian society and Georgian nation on this path of democratization. And from that perspective, from geopolitical perspective, since Georgia controls this is a vital route of the South Caucasus. Georgia is a bottleneck of the South Caucasus. Russians very well know if they control Georgia, they will basically control the entire South Caucasus region. By the way, not only the South Caucasus, but also the Central Asian Republic of the former Soviet Union. So by having all this, it has to be said that the European Union and the plans of the European Union to create Europe, whole, united, and peaceful and democratic, the efforts of the European Union, the partners of Georgia in the European Union, should be directed towards actions, that go far beyond, simply verbal concern or deepest concern. It must be a massive support of Georgian democracy. There must be support in investigating, all these cases of electoral fraud and falsifications. And if confirmed, all of these, if confirmed that the elections were rigged massively, systematically, and in a complex way, there must be new elections, and this must be supported by the European Union and the friends of Georgia in Europe.
So we've heard many reports on what's been happening during the Saturday vote, what's been happening over the weekend. We know that there was a protest at 7 p.m. local time in Tbilisi in front of the parliament, held by those who oppose the results of the vote. And I was wondering if there are any cases of violence, for example, that have taken place that could have potentially not only affected the vote on Saturday itself, but were shown afterwards, after the initial exit polls.
No, I mean, but you mean the violence during the election process, during the election day, or you mean the violence as the protesters went on the street, in the evening?
I would focus more on the election, because we know that this apparently was one of the elements of this so-called hybrid warfare, which was supposed to keep people in check and make sure that they vote correctly.
Yeah, this again, this kind of systemic violence. I mean, we had several cases of physical violence on the polling stations, for sure. There were, several of drastic cases where people were simply drawn out of the polling stations. The observers were beaten or, just simply removed from the polling stations. But again, this is just one element of the systemic approach, how in a kind of a hybrid way, the electoral victory can be secured. So again, there were several steps, not only the use of violence, use of control, intimidation, financial aspects, etc., but also there are many questions with regard to the digital aspect of the elections, since that was the first time that Georgia introduced so-called electronic voting, where you not simply putting your votes into this box where all the votes are collected, but it is taken in read by the electronic machine, and then all information is an electronically collected and then transferred to the central station in the central electoral commission or committee. So and this must be also investigated, because again the falsification of the election process took in a systemic, complex, massive way, and you cannot simply single out one element and say that this particular element was decisive in the electoral fraud. So you have to really investigate it systemically to identify what was the impact, the general impact on the electoral.
Definitely. The subject of Georgian election is something that we're going to be taking a very close look at over the next coming days and weeks. Thank you so much. Shalva Dzebisashvili, Professor of Political Science at the University of Georgia. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks, but please stay tuned as we'll have some news coming with Salia Strzemska in just a moment.